Thank you for thinking about Your Education Matters. Gianmarco Spiga is a native of Sardinia who began his post-secondary education at the University of Padua, founded in that Italian city in 1222. Transferring to SFU, Gianmarco is nearing graduation in the university's engineering program. Mr. Spiga has a strong interest in politics and social issues, as well as science and technology. He has had reason to reflect on the political awareness of university students both in Europe and North America. Gianmarco has an unusually international understanding of post-secondary education due to his interests and experience. Thanh Lam is nearing completion of her undergraduate degree in French and political science at SFU. Than's family are refugees from Vietnam who came to Canada so their children could benefit from our public education system. Ms. Lam has built on these opportunities, first as a French immersion graduate of Vancouver Technical High School, and currently in SFU's Public Administration and Community Services program. Thanh is an active volunteer and community member and recipient of numerous scholarship awards. We are pleased to welcome Gianmarco Spiga and Thanh Lam to Your Education Matters. Gianmarco, you began life in Sardinia and you find yourself here in Vancouver. So I'd like you to fill in the blanks there of how you got from there to here.
Well, first of all, thank you, Paul, for hosting me here today. So mine is a little bit of a funky history. I started progressively moving from far from Sardinia in 2004. At first, I got accepted to this international school. It's called the United World College of the Adriatic. And it's located in Trieste, in northern Italy, close to the border with Slovenia. So I spent 2 years there. I was 16, 17 back at the time. And it was quite an amazing experience. I found myself surrounded by 200 people from 80, 85 different countries in the world, which is something I've never seen before. You know, growing up in a small community, Sardinia, it's about 2 million inhabitants and quite dispersed throughout the island. So that was the first thing that struck me, right? I was in close contact with a lot of different cultures. And upon graduating from there, well, I took this decision of staying in Italy for a while because I figured I'd never seen my own country as an adult. And so I embarked in this aerospace engineering program in University of Padua, which is a really nice city, really welcoming to students. But eventually, was really disenfranchised with the quality of education there. I'm not going to say with the quality of teaching itself, but rather with the methodology. I found it was very inflexible, very, very stuck. We lacked the practical experience, especially upon talking with the later years, with the people that were graduating. And I saw a lot of problems coming up. I saw lack of funding from the government, lack of interest in general in the secondary education. And so that prompted me to look for something else. And I figured since I had this international experience, I would have loved to explore other places in the world. And so I got facing the problem of where to go. And one of the ideas was England, and then there was US, and then finally there was Canada. Well, the decision was a little bit of a die roll. What ultimately made a choice was the fact that I had a girlfriend here, and so I decided to just try my luck and come to Canada. And so far, I haven't regretted it. I found Vancouver very loving, very, very welcoming, and I like what I do at SFU. And it's a university that really supports
Well, one of the
interests.
#1 reasons why students go to school where they go is friends went there, or siblings, so that's understandable. It's just you came further. Thanh, how did you find your way to SFU?
My route is less eclectic than Gianmarco's, but I was in the French immersion program during high school, and I just wanted to continue that education, and I thought SFU was a good place to do it, due to their unique program where I could study political science in French, and as well as other social sciences as well, history and literature. So it it was distinctive from UBC.
So the great majority of your curriculum is in French. Not all, but quite a bit.
Yeah, at the beginning it's about 75% French. So your history of political science is taught in French. And as you go forward, you are allowed to choose upper division electives and courses as well. But then once you get to that point, they're mainly in English, so you kind of switch to that side.
All right.
Yeah.
And you've had the opposite experience of Gianmarco in the sense that you went to Europe to study, correct?
Yeah.
Could you tell us about that?
Yes, well, part of the requirements for my program is that you must participate in exchange in a Francophone university. The choices were Quebec, France, Belgium. So I went for France, I went for Paris. Figured why not? If you're going to go on exchange, you might as well go to Paris and do it.
Hard to beat that.
Hard,
and
yeah.
what was the school that you went to?
I went to Sciences Po Paris. Yeah.
And is that specialized in social science?
Yeah, it does specialize in social sciences, particularly particular science and public administration. I think it's one of the main schools for forming public servants. So
Yes.
a lot of French presidents or prime ministers have gone to that school.
Yes, and very difficult to get into for French citizens. I
Yes,
believe,
but if you're an international student, there's a back door.
Yeah,
So
right.
I would
if you're a
recommend
French
that
citizen,
back
it
door.
almost guarantees a good job in the bureaucracy, I think.
Yeah,
right?
once you're at Sciences Po, you tell someone you're at Sciences Po and you graduate, you go to another school, which is École Nationale d'Administration, and that's kind of the second part of it. And then once you're done that school,
Okay.
you're set for life.
So now that we've set the stage a bit, I want to ask you about the student experience in Canada vis-a-vis Italy and France. What classes are like, what students' day is like, whether students work or not. Could you talk a little bit for us about how you compare and contrast being a student in Italy, in your case, Gianmarco, versus being at SFU?
Yes, well, the main difference is physical, and let me explain here. The big difference can be exemplified in the fact that here at SFU or here in Canada, we have campuses, whereas many universities in Europe don't have a main campus. So what it means is that your classes are scattered throughout the city, right? So a lot of the university cities are centered around the university, they're built around it. And there's a couple of implications. Students don't necessarily have a place to meet. They don't have student union buildings. So it's kind of left to them to meet and discuss with each other, right? Whereas here in Canada, we see other opportunities for socializing. We see central building. No, SFU's campus itself is built with that in mind. You know, the whole academic quadrangle thing. The other main difference is in the structure of education itself. As I said, SFU and North American universities have a flexibility that we don't have. Our programs are very structured. You enroll in an engineering program, you know it's going to take 5 years, you know what courses you're going to take, exactly in which semester, and who's going to teach them, and in what order you're going to take them. And of course, you can choose to deviate from that, but that doesn't happen really often. And also, upon entering a program, that's the only thing you're going to study. There's no such thing as WQB requirements. So there is no possibility of taking courses outside of your major, outside of your field of interest. That said, another thing that is very different is the class size. I mean, we do have a lot more university students, partially because university is free. So even people with no clear direction in life choose to enroll in university just as a safe choice, right? It's kind of the safe thing to do, and it's very easy. The government supports your education fully. And so we find ourselves with big classes, you know, where a teacher is speaking to 200 or 300 students, which happens in first year even in Canada. But I find in Italy it continues throughout the 4 or 5 years of your education. And so that makes for a very impersonal education, right? Your teacher is someone that is very remote from you, is someone that you often don't know personally, except for some rare exceptions. And then it's someone that is on a podium. It's on a different level.
Do you go to tutorials with graduate students like we do at SFU?
Yes, we do have tutorials for some of the courses, but they're in a big class. We don't have different sections for tutorial, right? The class doesn't get split up. and they're not institutionalized, so there's not a specific time. You just arrange with the tutor.
Oh, okay.
It's a very informal thing. It's more of an extra.
Do you have opportunity to talk to professors individually about your career plans or other advisors? Do they have professional advisors who are available to talk to the students about course selection, career planning, and so on?
Well, I'm not going to lie, I don't know. But I think that's worse than me being able to give you an answer, because I thought that I mean, it'd be very bad if they had them, actually, because if they had them and nobody knows about it, it's as bad as not having them. But definitely there wasn't a lot of reaching out to students in that sense. I never felt like that. You could go and talk to professors in their office hours, you know. I'm pretty sure some of them are able to give you great advice about career opportunities and about your curriculum development. But other than that, I never saw the role and figure of advisor in the university.
Now, Tan, as he talks about Padua, does any of that resonate with your experience in Paris, or was Paris quite different?
I think definitely it resonates, and I think it speaks to the approach that I think universities in Europe have towards education. It's very regulated, very structured. There's still this distinguished relationship between professor and student, and it's very formal. You can't go beyond those boundaries or those social roles in the classroom. So for me, going to Sciences Po, I don't remember having office hours. I don't remember ever going to office hours. I remember being scared to email my professor. There was just a sense of, you don't speak to the professor, he's busy doing research, he's busy being implicated in policy issues. So you kind of have that sense of fear, I think, as a student.
How about the sense of a campus?
With Paris, the thing with Paris was that they're trying to, I guess, dilute their campuses. So they were in the process of expansion. But it's the same thing where it was one central campus. There really wasn't a student life, or there weren't any facilities. But that said, I think I don't know about you, but I think student culture in Europe and in North America is very different, because like Gianmarco mentioned, the role of social services and the role of the state towards education, I think it's much more reinforced in Europe than it is here, in the sense that tuition fees are based on financial need, and there isn't such thing as collecting debt for your education. And you wouldn't frequently encounter students who do work part-time.
And anybody at that school, the majors would be pretty locked in because it's a very specialized institution.
Yeah.
So you commit early to your major and you stay with it.
Not even just your major, they have integrated master's programs now where you choose your BA and then you choose your master's. So within
Same time.
Well, not at once, but here, I guess you get your BA, you kind of have a choice of whether you want to take time off, but they have something called the integrated bachelor's, master's programs where within a short amount of time, you just rush through it. And I think in Canada, you have a lot of older students, mature students, whereas when I was in France, once you're done high school, you go to school. There's no leeway, there's no, the gap year that you take.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. We'll be back in just a moment.
I'm ready. I want the adventure. I saw an SFU presentation back in my high school in Italy, and after a lot of research, I decided to enroll in the mechatronics program. And you know what? 3 years later, here I am working on my robots. Being in a cohort program such as Stepan was a great opportunity to make friends, and some of those friendships are still lasting nowadays. I think it's really important to try things out before you actually commit to them. And my co-op experience really helped me decide what I was going to do in life. SFU is not only a place where you learn, but also a place where you can share ideas and really grow as an individual. In my first year, I was looking for clubs at SFU, and I found Engineers Without Borders. It really changed my perspective on things, and after that, I also ended up changing my major. So now I'm in my third year in engineering physics, and after taking a TA position, I really discovered a love for teaching. What I want in my life is really more than just work. I want to take on some projects in Latin America, I want to travel, and I definitely see teaching in my future. A complete life.
Tan, one of the topics that we brought up earlier in the program that I'd like to come back to is how students in Paris versus students in Vancouver pay for their higher education. What did you witness as you were a student in Paris?
One of the most startling realizations is that students in Europe just simply had more time to study, were less stressed, and were more devoted and committed to their education. And I think that was mainly due to the fact that they had financial assistance from the government, and there was just no pressure to take a part-time job to pay for their own schooling.
So when you say financial assistance, you mean the tuition was free?
Yes, well, in the French education system, I think Sciences Po is particular because it's private, but it does get public funding, and so tuition is really needs-based.
Okay.
So if your parents don't have the income, then the state will compensate. Whereas if your parents are of a higher income bracket, then you do have some type of proportional tuition.
Okay. And how about your living expenses?
Your living expenses actually is subsidized by the government. In France, they have something called the CAF, which, depending on your rent, they can compensate up to, over 50% of your rent. And in that case, all you have to do is worry about, minor expenses such as food. And if your parents are helping out with your accommodation, then education really is almost stress-free, at least on a financial term.
All right.
Yeah.
Gianmarco, how about at Padua in Italy? What did you see in terms of financing?
Well, okay, beside the students that lived at home with their parents, what happens in Italy is that university is free. That's the state holds that paramount, right? So if you come from out of the province, for example, they have to sponsor your housing. We have student houses, or otherwise, as Tan said, for France, the state helps out with some checks. The other thing that we have is dining halls. There's a lot of dining halls scattered through the city, and students use them intensively. They're renowned for having high quality food.
Some I'm not surprised in Italy.
Yeah. And they're also subsidized. I mean, a meal is ridiculously cheap. It's €3, and if you come from our province again, or if your parents can pay, the university gives you 1 free meal per day. So I find it pretty significant, as far as allowing people to access education goes.
And did you observe whether students were working jobs while they went to university?
No, and there's something I've never seen. And actually, Tan just reminded me of that when she spoke about it before. It's something that is so rare to see, and it's something that is just a no-no with parents.
Well, I assume if they're not working jobs at university, they're not working jobs in secondary school
Nope.
either.
Nope. As a matter of fact, it's illegal to work until you're 16.
Yeah. Well, this is a good example of something that's changed in North America greatly in my lifetime. It was done before your lifetime. That nobody talks much about is all the energy and time, starting not at university but at secondary school, that students are putting into jobs, and the consequences of that, not only on study time, but on whether they can stay awake in the morning. It's something I worry about. Now, just what is your observation of your peer group at SFU and your university friends in Canada? To what extent are they working? How are they funding their education, and so on?
I think everyone is working. Everyone I know knows that they need to finance themselves some way in order to pay for tuition, residence, basic needs. And I honestly don't think I can find a friend who hasn't worked part-time.
And about how many hours would you say?
At least 2 to 3 days a week, so I say a good over 20 to 30 hours a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that your experience with
Same
your
experience.
Canadian friends?
Most of my friends here average 10-15 hours a week, and I mean, we're talking about engineering students, and engineering is already a demanding program.
Yeah.
So I don't really know where they find the time. I stopped working when I realized that a day is only 24 hours, so there's only so much I can do. And I think it does make it harder for them to graduate on time, or even it lowers the retention level, right? And there's something that has popped up in various discussions, even within the faculty. Engineering, for example, is at the same time one of the faculties that requires the most effort from a student, and the faculty that probably requires the most money input from a student. And so combining these two things is quite dangerous, right? We have people who graduate in 6-7 years, as opposed to a 3-4 years average for SFU. And it's really becoming a source of worry right now.
What are some of the things that you've experienced at university, Gianmarco, that you like or would like to change?
Well, I tend to agree with Tan, actually. one of the great changes and one of the most important things for me at SFU is getting to know my professors and my community, right? I find that it makes the human side of it makes a big difference in your learning, right? It makes you be more conscious about the material you're learning, it makes you be connected to it in a much stronger way. So having this bond with your professors, and even just walking around the university's corridors and seeing people shouting at you because they found some new research, that's amazing. That's why it's exactly why I'm in university. Because if I just wanted to learn, I could just open a book at home, right? So that's what makes the difference. The other thing that I really like is the possibility of exploring different fields. And let me explain. We said before that university in Europe is very structured, right? It doesn't offer much possibility for exploration, for engaging with different subjects, and for being exposed to different materials. And that's something that I found here that I really like, right? We're compelled to take writing courses or quantitative courses or breadth courses. But I find that's very propedeutic. It's very propedeutic for a formation of an individual, right? Suppose you're a physics student or you're a math student, you can enter the job market. You can enter the real world without knowing something about psychology, without knowing something about sociology, right? I like to quote an example. I'm taking a sociology course, and it's been eye-opening. And I mean, I'm in my 40th year. I'm obviously passionate about sciences, but I've also found a new world that now for me, it's just opened its doors, and it's fantastic. It's worth exploring.
Mm-hmm. Well, that leads me to want to ask you about the political attitudes of students and their social world. Again, you've had experience, both of you, in Europe and in Canada. Could you characterize the political awareness of students, your political science major, and also something about their cultural and social lives?
Well, I guess one way to sum it up is to say that when I was on exchange, the university was closed down several times due to strikes. I mean, the faculty members weren't there. The entire city was paralyzed, and students were out there protesting. It was their commitment, it was their duty as a citizen to go out into public spaces and to express their opinions. And I think that just highlights the collective nature of political culture in Europe overall. I think it's more centered towards the community as opposed to the individual. And I think they're just more generally aware of politics and see meaning in politics than perhaps here.
Yeah. And it's an early start, right? I remember being in high school in Italy, and I was 13, 14 back then, and we occupied the school. We had the police coming and kicking us out. So political awareness is something that starts very early, and it's embedded in the system, right? And even if, as we said, we don't have spaces, physical spaces for discussion, we don't have lobbies where we can get together, the political discussion is driven by students, and they gather together outside of universities. They form groups, and it's so strong to the point that even political parties enter university elections. So if you have a student senate, you're going to have parties that reflect what the political parties in the government are. And I find that's really interesting. And here is a few I find the opposite. Most of the political discussions happen in an academic context, right? They happen in the university, and some of them are university driven. I find that's quite an important difference,
Chan, how about the social life, the social world of students? Did you see it as significantly different in Paris from in Vancouver and Burnaby?
I think it is different. I think, at least in North America, you do have campus facilities. There's this type of, this culture of community, campus, whereas I think being the school I was in, it was really based in Paris, so there wasn't a really student-driven, or at least institutionalized student-driven culture, but students on their own would just go to a cafe and study together and, make groups, and it's really common in France to have a student to send an email to everyone saying, hey, let's compile our notes together and study together. Whereas here, I don't think you see that type of informal drive of, communal education. Yeah.
Well, I would like to say you see it, but you only see it during class time, or you only see it during the day. One thing that I found really striking is that people don't get together. Even friends from university don't get together outside of university. It almost seems very categorized, right? If I know you from class, then that's what we're gonna do together. There is no way we can go, get a coffee outside after class. It's very rare. And that's something that makes a big difference, right? In terms of students socializing and discussing their views together. Yeah, and there's something that happens a lot in Europe, for example. You see each other mostly outside of class rather than in class.
Well, thank you both very much for joining us today on the program and sharing your experiences. I think it's very valuable for people to hear, especially people getting ready to go to university. We'll be back in a moment. Much is said about the importance of post-secondary education as British Columbia plans for a prosperous 21st century. Less is said about the rising cost of higher education for our students and the benefits of education that are not primarily economic. In the advanced social democracies of Europe, as well as some other countries, higher education has no tuition costs and student living expenses are compensated. Student loan debt is unknown or minimal. Statistics Canada, on the other hand, reports that approximately 60% of students here have debt, and those who borrow have an average indebtedness of $20,000. At the same time, students are typically working outside jobs during their undergraduate years. We need to ask whether watering down our university education by extensive employment during the student years is harming instructional outcomes. We need also to question policies that lead so many young persons to start life with considerable indebtedness. Also, may we ask why our students' liberal education is so little spoken of. Higher education has never traditionally been seen as vocational training. The high aspirations of a liberal education are at one with concepts such as critical thinking, creativity, innovation, political consciousness, spiritual and environmental values, aesthetic sensibility, and leadership. Why do we allow discussions of higher education to center on economic goals and exclusively material benefits? Why do we aim so low and exclude the value of aesthetic dimensions of our lives? Those of us in education want to aspire to more than training workers. We want to help create complete human beings. Thank you for thinking about Your Education Matters.